皆さんこんにちは。ユニセフアジア親善大使のアグネスちゃんです。2022年2月24日、ウクライナ紛争が激化してから間もなく1年となります。私は2018年、ウクライナのドンバス地域を訪問しました。その時、会った子どもたち、今何しているのかな、どうなっているのかなと考えるだけで胸が痛みます。今日はウクライナ出身、ユニセフの広報官であるユリア・ユロバさんにウクライナ子どもたちの現状を伺ってみたいと思います。
Hello, Yulia. I'm Agnes. Hi. How are
Hi,
you?
Agnes. I'm good, thank you.
Yes, can you introduce yourself to the Japanese people?
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Agnes, for having me. So my name is Yulia Yurova, and I'm a communication specialist at UNICEF in Geneva. And I'm also Ukrainian from the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv. So 12 years ago, in March 2011, I started my work at UNICEF Ukraine as a head of communications. And after that, I worked on partnerships and fundraising, also in Ukraine. And when the conflict in Eastern Ukraine started in 2014, I was working on the front lines, and I was witnessing and telling the stories of the internally displaced families and children in order to fundraise and to mobilize resources for UNICEF's response in emergency. After 5 years at UNICEF Ukraine, I started my international career, and I worked at Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and then at the World Health Organization, HQ in Geneva. And then 3.5 years ago, I came back to UNICEF yes, that was like coming back home. And I came back as communication specialist at UNICEF Private Fundraising and Partnership Division in Geneva, where I work now. And my ongoing work is to support partnerships in Asia and Pacific, including Japan, working with the Japanese companies and helping with communication assets to maximize results and steward these partnerships. But as you know, all has changed almost a year ago on the 24th of February, when I've learned from my father that the war in my home country, in Ukraine, has started. And I was shocked when I've learned about it. And I was devastated. I was constantly, and I am constantly stressed about my family, how they're doing, because they were and they're still in Ukraine. And then I was thinking, I need to focus. I need how I can help my fellow Ukrainian and where I could be useful. So that's why I asked to be deployed from Geneva to Romania. So I worked at the different Romanian borders in March and April. Then I was deployed again in October, and I was back home in Ukraine. And in more than a week time, I'm traveling back to Poland. So also to talk about 1 year mark of war in Ukraine. And in Romania, in Ukraine, I witnessed UNICEF's response in action. And what I'm going to share with you today is my personal story, my personal reflections of what I witnessed, and my own experience in Romania and in Ukraine. And I'm sure that you've seen the images of the destroyed buildings and in the center of Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities. But what I would like to share is what is not shown on TV, what is not on the cover of the magazines, what I witnessed, how UNICEF is responding from the first days of the war, when we were building and setting up the Blue Dot centers along the crossing borders with Ukraine and also inside Ukraine. But also the most importantly is to talk about the resilience, the warmth, and the calmness and the strength the Ukrainians are continuing to manifest for almost a year after the beginning of the war, especially those who are still in Ukraine, as my family.
So your family is right now still in Ukraine. How are they doing? Are they okay?
Thank you for asking, Agnes. So, yes, my family is in Ukraine. They never left Ukraine. They're from Kiev, and they stayed in Kiev until it was really dangerous back in February. Then they moved to the Western Ukraine, and then a few months after they were back. So my grandfather is 93 years old. He's the veteran of the Second World War. And you could imagine it's the second war during his lifetime. So at the beginning of war, he said, we're not going to leave. This is my home, and I will stay to protect it. So that was their decision. I fully respect it as decision of many Ukrainians who decided to stay. And I just talked to my dad, who is in Kiev. I'm lucky to talk to him because there are electricity blackouts. There is a interruption in connection. So when we talk, I'm very happy. So he said that they're strong, they're resilient, they're planning carefully their time between the sirens, the electricity blackouts, so they could take care of the granddad. But as many Ukrainian families who stay in Ukraine, they're strong. The spirit is really strong. And my family, as millions of Ukrainians inside and outside Ukraine, we have one thing in common. We want this war to stop, and we look forward to rebuilding new and beautiful future for Ukraine.
So do they have like basic necessities like water, like food?
So the basic food is there. The supply of at least in Kiev, the supply of the magazines, not all magazines are open, but they have food. The electricity, as I said, there are like the hours when electricity is on, and there are like electricity blackouts. The connection is also interrupted, but we managed to talk. And what is really impressive is that teachers are teaching between these sirens and the electricity blackouts, and children are learning. So they find the connection, they find the plugs in the magazines, in the shops which are open to charge if they don't have charger. So they're really eager to continue life and to live and to continue life. And you know, the situation inside Ukraine is appalling, and I'm still shocked what is happening in my country, because the schools were shelled. I talked to one boy in Romania, and he told me that he witnessed his school being shelled, and he was just lucky to be far away on another side of the street, so he was not injured. Hospitals were targeted, and the civilians are targeted by the shelling, and children are getting caught in the middle of it. So almost 1 year since the beginning of war, 7.8 million children are paying for the consequences of the war. 7.8 million. It's huge number. And these children of Ukraine, they have been separated from their families, from their homes. They were displaced they were separated from their friends, the loved ones, schools. They witnessed violence, they witness disruption, and they also carry this untold trauma. And UNICEF is working there on the ground, making the difference for children and their families, both in Ukraine and outside Ukraine. And inside Ukraine, UNICEF installed this Spilno child spots. And Spilno is a beautiful word in Ukrainian, which means together. So these Spilno child spots, they're providing services for families and children. So to provide them with the psychosocial support, the essential services. And also they're providing help not only for children. So parents can also access the services at Spilno spots. And there, as you know, many families in Ukraine, they lost their homes and they were displaced. So families at Spilno spots, they could apply for the cash support. Essential now to bring food on the table, and also to buy warm clothes for children, because now it's winter and it's really cold, and with electricity blackout. So this support is essential. And because there are harsh conditions for families, especially for families with children. So as of December last year, there were 182 Spilno spots operating in Ukraine, providing services for children and families. Over 300 locations and mobile teams are currently working into 20 regions throughout the country. So from my own experience at Spilno Spot at the beginning of October, when I was working in Ukraine, when I was deployed in Ukraine, I was working at Spilno Spot in Irpin. Irpin is a small town near Kyiv. And at the beginning of war, it was one of the most destroyed and damaged together with Bucha. So the school where Spilno Spot is located, that school was destroyed. And that school was rehabilitated by UNICEF and the European Union. So because at that time, and still now, the war was ongoing, so in addition to the Spilno Spot and the services it is providing, UNICEF installed underground child-friendly bomb shelter. So to make sure that the children are safe, because the shelling was happening even at that time, and that happened very often. So during the week when I was working at that Spilno Spot in Irpin, there was a shelling happening in the town next to Irpin. So sirens were on, and together with teachers and with children, I was running to this child-friendly shelter. And I was sitting there for a few hours, several days, and I looked around and I looked at the equipment. So child-friendly shelters within the Spilno Spot centers, they are equipped with safe water, with independent electricity, heating system, the blankets, the equipment, so children could draw, could play. There are like the black walls, so they could draw. There are toilets, independent exits, so they could quickly be evacuated. So all this equipment is needed when children spend there, and we sat for hours there waiting until the sirens would go off. And also UNICEF provided trainings for the teachers, so they know how to calm children, how to deal with children when they're inside the shelters. And you know, when I was sitting inside the child-friendly shelter, I was so proud of UNICEF staff who built that shelter, because it is, and it was, and it is saving children's lives, and including my own life, because I was there, and that saved me. And that was the week before heavy shelling started on the 10th of October in the center of Kyiv. And at that time I was in Kyiv, and I remember there was Monday morning and the sirens were on, and then, you know, the smoke about the city center of Kyiv, and that was really traumatic. And what I witnessed, and I'm still working on this with the UNICEF counselor, walking through this trauma of what I witnessed, because that was really scary. On the 10th of October, when the whole situation has escalated, right? But you know what surprised me the most? When I left home, when the sirens were off, on that 10th of October, I went on the streets, and the people surprised me, and the Kyiv services, you know, they were cleaning the streets between the sirens. After the shelling, they were cleaning the streets. They were cutting the trees because it was October and they were getting ready for winter. They were planting this, you know, winter flowers, chrysanthemums. And it was like they were focused on everyday life. No panic, no tears, very focused, very concentrated on doing everyday work. And the children and families who were in the underground stations, because now metro underground stations, they're serving as the bomb shelters. They were singing, they were cheering each other. They were like, you know, all united as ever before. And, you know, when I saw this and when I witnessed this, when I was in Kyiv after the shelling on that day and the following days, it just proved to me how strong spirit we have and how united we are. And this is what I wanted to share with you and with the people of Japan, that I'm so proud to be Ukrainian. And with that spirit which I saw, we can never be defeated. And as our President Vladimir Zelensky said, we need to pass this darkness with dignity. The most important is to keep the light in your heart. And I wanted to share this slide with you and with our audience today.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry this is happening to Ukraine. And, I actually visited Kiev and the Donbas region in 2018 for a UNICEF mission. I was actually very surprised to know that the conflict has been going on in Donbas region for already 5 years when I was there. So adding on this, 4 more years is about 9 years already. And so the children who is living in Donbas was already going through years and years of war. And some of them are displaced, but most of them, as you say, because Ukrainians are very dedicated to their land, dedicated to their country, to their culture. So many of them actually stayed, but because of the shelling was going on, so I visited this village where this lady and her house was bombed, but because there's no shelter in the village, so they know that the bombs are coming, but they don't know where to go. So she put her head inside her oven. See the brick oven that has a chimney go up? So that's how they breathe. She can breathe and then protect herself from the bombings. And I said, why don't you just run away? Because it's dangerous. And then she said, because I don't want to run away. I don't want to, to seek help. I want to be, dependent. I want to protect my land. Basic goodness in people, the strength. I was very, very delighted to be in Ukraine because it was such a beautiful country. I mean, the land was fantastic. And then all the culture and the buildings and all the history, with all these interactions with all kinds of cultures within Ukraine. And then I also visited, as you say, the schools in the Donbas region. And as you say, bomb shelters underground. So you know what the schools was like? They have walls, and some of them are painted green, some of them are painted red. So the walls are very thin. So if you don't have enough time to run to the shelter, you stay at the green wall. Do you think how scary that is for the children? But I noticed that, in the school, the windows are all with sandbags. Yeah. So, yeah, right. There's windows, but they can't see outside. Same situation. Right? So the children really felt like they're not free. For younger children, I noticed that you've been to Romania, to help with the UNICEF response. Can you share some of the experiences of how UNICEF is helping the refugees, from Ukraine?
Yes, thank you. And yes, I was asked to be deployed, and I was in Romania in March and April, just the beginning of the war, when thousands of families and children were crossing all the borders, including Romanian border. And I worked at the several Blue Dot centers. So in Romania at the different crossing borders, Blue Dot centers. So I followed the families once they crossed the border, and at the Blue Dot centers, they were offering the whole services, transportation, accommodation, temporary or for longer stay, hot food, first psychological and medical aid. And also there were always at Blue Dot centers, the child-friendly space. And I will tell you more details about that. So the Blue Dot centers, it's like connecting the dots, right? So to make sure that all children are monitored, traced, protected, and safe at every step of their journey towards their destination. So since the beginning of war, and I saw how Blue Dots were installing, because I was just at the beginning of war working at the crossing borders. So since the beginning of war, there are 40 Blue Dot centers joined UNICEF and UNHCR operational in the targeted countries along the border with Ukraine and in Europe. So each Blue Dot Center has a child-friendly space. And that was really important because when families and children were crossing the border, for some of them, it took weeks to travel to the border. So they crossed, they're very stressed, they were tearful, they were shell-shocked, and they needed a space after registration and all the basic services. They needed space to rest. So there was at each Blue Dot Center, there was a child-friendly space where mothers could just breathe, they're safe, their children are protected, the children could play, there were like all these learning materials, the drawings, everything. So that was really important that they have this space to rest after days or weeks of traveling. And one day I was working in Isakcha, that's the crossing border between Romania and Ukraine, and Danube River is between two countries. So the Ukrainian families and children would take the ferry from Ukraine, pass Danube River, then pass Romanian border by foot, and then immediately after crossing border, they would come to the Blue Dot Center. So because it's near Danube River, it was really windy. And one day I was playing with children and mothers in the child-friendly space, and something big blown over outside the tent. So it was a big boom. So all mothers and children were so shocked, they fell on the floor because they thought it's a shelling. And this is when I realized the depth for the trauma they're carrying, even when they're safe, even then when they're in Romania. And I was like calming them, like saying, like, you're safe. That's fine. You're not in danger anymore. But the trauma, it's so deep. And yes, that accident, it really impressed me, and I was really heartbroken to see these traumatized mothers and children, majority women and children. This is what impressed me the most. And every child whom I met at the border broke my heart, and every family story, they made me cry. And it was really emotional because I'm also Ukrainian. I'm UNICEF staff and I'm Ukrainian. So that was just really, really difficult and touching and heartbreaking. But also there were beautiful moments of peace and joy, which I witnessed at the Blue Dot Centers in Romania.
Yeah, can you share some of the moments when you can bring a smile to a child, or, like give them some peaceful time?
These memories are precious. I will keep them for all my life, because amongst this all ongoing emergency and war, when you have this moment of peace and you see the smile on the child's face, that's the biggest gift. And yes, I witnessed the families reunions at the Blue Dot Centers, when grandparents were bringing their grandchildren to reunite with their mothers, mainly who worked before or were working in Europe. So they were reuniting with the tears, with the smiles, with the hugs. And one day when I was working in the Blue Dot Center in Romania, in Sighetul Marmației, I met a family, mother Olena with two children, Anastasia and Andrei. Anastasia was 11 and Andrei was 5. So we started to talk, and they were waiting in the child-friendly center for their transport. So we started to talk, and they told me the story, how the days they were traveling towards the border and what is their plan. And mother and Anastasia, they were very open, very friendly, but Andrei was sitting at the corner, very calm, very sad. And then it appeared during the conversation that on that day there was his birthday. Can you imagine? And his mom was planning the birthday celebration for months before that, and they had to cancel it because of the war. But we cannot cancel life. We cannot cancel birthdays. We cannot cancel celebration of life. And when we learned about this birthday, so with my colleagues, we ran to the nearest cafe And we were looking for the cake, for anything to make a symbolic birthday celebration. So we found the local dessert, and it looks like donut, and it's called papanasi. That's the Romanian donut. And we came back with a little candle with the donut to the tent, and we sang happy birthday to Andrei. And he was so happy. And that moment, that made Andrei tears into a smile. And this is how, yeah. And I'm sorry. And this is how at the Romanian border, at the Blue Dot, surrounded by UNICEF staff, by his mom and sister, this is how he turned 6 years old. That was his birthday. And I hope he remembers that birthday, but I will remember it forever. And that smile on his face, that was precious.
But I'm so happy that you can do the birthday for the 6-year-old, and it's really great. When you do your missions and the responses, did you get some like thank yous, or that the people are saying that, oh, I'm glad that you're here, or did you get some response from the people of Ukraine?
So yes, many. Ukrainians are, as you know, we're a very grateful nation. We're always grateful for help. We remember our friends. We carry this gratitude and warmth in our hearts. So yes, Ukrainian families and children, when they were crossing the borders, those whom I met, they were very grateful. Some mothers were like, when I was in the child-friendly tent, they were like, giving me your children, like they saw UNICEF, like, hold your child, I need to go to the toilet, I need to, bring us soup. So there was a trust and the gratitude to what they were doing. And yes, many, many warm words. And, with some of the families whom I met, I'm still keeping in touch. And I'm following with them and checking how they're doing, how the kids are doing. And I met another family in another border in Isakci again, at the Danube River. And that's the family of mother Zlata and Kostya, 6 years old boy with his younger son, younger brother from Odessa. So they were calmly playing at the child-friendly tent. And at that time, I had an interview like we have today with you, with Hugh Jackman. And Kostya just joined our interview. So he came, I introduced him. I wish I would be now in Romania or in Poland, and I would invite children to our interview. So Kostya joined our interview with Hugh Jackman, and he drew Wolverine. Of course, they all know this character. And then the following day, Hugh Jackman shared that story about the Ukrainian child, Kostya, on all his social media platforms with millions of followers, talking about the war in Ukraine and UNICEF's work, and particularly to Kostya as the Ukrainian child. And, it was in April. So in October, Hugh Jackman had birthday. So I wrote to Kostya saying, like, you remember your friend Wolverine? So he has birthday, let's do something. So he drew Wolverine in a better quality, I must say, because he had a bit more time to prepare. So he drew happy birthday, Hugh, Wolverine. We shared it with Hugh, and he shared again on his social media platforms, saying, like, you remember my friend Kostya? So he is now in Germany, as many Ukrainian children who were displaced. He is going to school. He is safe, although millions of Ukrainian children are not safe, and they're in Ukraine and they need your help. So we're keeping in touch, and I dream one day I will meet Kostya and Zlata, maybe on another border when they will be coming back home, and we will connect with Hugh again, saying like, this is Kostya and he is going home with his family.
So there's still quite a lot of children inside Ukraine.
Inside Ukraine, yes. Inside Ukraine, and even like friends, my friends, the children of my friends, some of them like are going to schools like Kostya is doing. He is integrating into the German society. He started German, but many families and mothers and children, they decided to come back, especially during summer before September, so they could come back to the Ukrainian school. And in September, Kyiv and center was relatively calm, and then it all changed on the 10th of October when the shelling was at the center of Kyiv and the war escalated enormously. But many children are in Ukraine, and they don't go to school because it's not safe. They all telestudy, they study on distance learning, between the sirens, between electricity cuts, but they're so eager to learn, to continue their study.
I hope that the war will stop as soon as possible, and so that the children can go back to school and the children who's displaced can go home. And thank you for, doing so many things for the Ukrainian people. I know it's your home, but it's still I'm glad that UNICEF is able to help. And I'm really grateful for everybody on the ground who's doing the work. Do you have a message, finally, for the Japanese people? Leave a message with them, please.
Yes, I would like to say that I have really strong professional connection with UNICEF Japan and the people of Japan. Because when I started, it was my first week at UNICEF Ukraine 12 years ago. When I just started to work as the head of communications, the major earthquake happened in Tohoku region in Japan. And UNICEF Japan launched this beautiful Tegami project, an initiative to send the letters and the drawings to the letters of encouragement from children around the world to the children of Tohoku,
Yeah.
to the children of Tohoku, to support them with encouragement and give them the sense of care and love and the hope for the future. So that was my first week at UNICEF, and I worked with the Ukrainian children to send the drawings to Japan.
Oh, thank you so much.
And then we received the drawings from the Japanese children. So it was a beautiful exchange. And now, look, 12 years after, the people of Japan are helping Ukrainians, are helping Ukrainian children to survive, you're giving us hope for the better future when war is over. And we have this beautiful proverb in Ukrainian, which could be translated, friend in need is a friend indeed. And I believe that the friendship between our countries, between Japan and Ukraine, through all these years, it is growing. And as Ukrainian and as UNICEF staff, I'm really grateful to the people of Japan, to the Japanese families, to the Japanese children for supporting us. And all the stories which I told you about the Blue Dot centers in the neighborhood countries and Spilno spots, this would not be impossible to implement by UNICEF without the generous support of the partners, of the donors. So thanks to you, we could provide this help, this essential help for the Ukrainian families and children. And thanks to you, goodwill ambassadors and the well-known influencers and celebrities, because you share this message to the world. You tell the story of the Ukrainian families and children, and we all have the role to play in this situation, in this emergency, and your role is essential. So from the bottom of the Ukrainian heart, and as UNICEF staff, I would like to say arigato gozaimasu, дуже дякую, thank you so much.
Thank you, Yulia, for sharing your experience, and our hearts goes out for every Ukrainian. We pray for peace, and at the meantime, we will support you and UNICEF and try to hopefully that help the children to overcome this difficult time. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure talking to you. Stay safe. Encourage all the people in Ukraine and send them our love. Remind them that the Japanese people are thinking about them. Thank you so much. God bless.
God bless. Thank you.